when you think of like more mid-income or more low-skilled migrant workers, then you see that there's an increasing demand, and not just from Kenya, but from other countries in the region, like Uganda and Ethiopia as well, for migrant domestic workers, care workers, but then also when you think of men who move to those countries in the Gulf and the rest of the Middle East, then of course there's also demand for drivers, construction workers as well. Yeah. And this increasing demand for workers in the Middle East is obviously based on quite a number of factors. The first one being obviously there's demand. I mean, these are oil-rich countries, and some of this sectors or positions are deemed to be too low level for the nationals of those countries to fill. And so, of course, they will look at, historically, they've looked at Southeast Asia and South Asia, countries like India, countries like Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines as well has been, a key country of origin for migrant workers to go to the Gulf and the Middle East. And this is, for probably 30 years now, 3 decades. Yeah. Ethiopia in this region has always been, compared to other countries, since the 80s, Ethiopia has been supplying labor to those countries. But in the last, let's say, probably decade, we have been seeing a trend from Kenya and Uganda, and quite recently I've heard that, Rwanda as well has signed bilateral labor agreements with some of these countries in the Middle East. I believe it's with Saudi Arabia. So we are seeing increasing demand from Eastern Africa, beyond Ethiopia, but also other countries in Eastern Africa as well. And of course, because there's increasing trends rather. Of course, that's because there's demand in those countries, but then also there's rising unemployment rates here in this part of the world. So people are moving for those reasons, but also people are moving because we are all aspirational. We all want better for ourselves. So regardless of economic status, regardless of where you are in life, and regardless of region, there's not much of a difference looking at Eastern Europe or East Africa. Really, the reasons are more or less the same. But here, of course, we are seeing that in Kenya and other parts of the region, like this, quite, the population of young people is quite big, and the population is growing. Whereas in the other side of the world, population, those countries are becoming more depopulated. Here, the population is growing, and so which means it's a higher demand for work, and unfortunately, not enough jobs have been created to fill that demand. So then we see more people go.
I think some of these push and pull factors include, of course, lack of employment. Majorly, when you look at most of these people, they haven't gone to college. They at least have secondary education, but they haven't gotten somewhere that they're a stable kind of way of getting money, or a wage or a salary. And I'm not trying to say that you have to have a university or a college degree or a diploma to get a good job. But even a business, you find that most of them, they're in the informal sector, or they're just the small scale traders, So the job is not very stable. They have very, very low wages, or even some of them are domestic workers, and even in our own country, and they're not paid. They're paid below the minimum wage. So when some of these agencies or agents or the brokers approach and they promise you 3 times of what you're earning, or maybe you don't even have a job, and you imagine going and working for 2 years, so you calculate and you're like, okay, yeah, I think I can try this. So one of the major things is to look for employment, of course, economic push, And another thing is that some of these people, they come from very marginalized communities. When you look at Mombasa and the environments, Kilifi, you find that education education of these girls is very minimal. And so anytime they feel like they can get an opportunity to have a better life, so they just go with the flow. So yeah, some of those people, they take advantage of that some of these girls are from poor families and vulnerable, so they end up just being very easily convinced, and of course lack of information. When people don't have the information, then it's very easy to just be convinced by anyone and they just leave the country. And so you find that so many people, they don't have information towards all these challenges that people undergo there. And of course, as human beings, people live by hope. As long as you know one or two people, or you don't even know anyone who has ever been there, but you're like, okay, yeah, let me just try. I mean, it's just work. Yeah, people take it as just work, but it turns out that it's not the same when you get there. Um, yeah, those are some of the push and pull factors that make people still go back. Yeah, and you find also that people want to provide for their families. You find maybe you're a breadwinner in your family, or you want a better life, for your family. You're your kid, you have a kid, you don't have, you're still not able to provide for your family, so you choose to just leave the country and go and work there. Yeah, I think those are majorly some of the push and pulls.
I'm a child I'm the firstborn of 5 children, a single mother. So I could not, I was like the breadwinner in that family. My big brothers and sisters could not do anything. So, and I've been brought up in a village or ghetto called Soweto, Kara West. So I had to do something. Yeah, and I was also blessed. I had 2 kids. So I could not just lay down and wait because things were not working. Yeah.
Niko naishi nyumbani na familia yangu, na chenye kilifanya sana sana nitake kwenda Lebanon. Niko nafikiria nikienda Lebanon maisha itabadilika, sababu I'm the breadwinner of the family. So familia yetu mimi ndiye nimekuwa nikisimamia. Hata venye nimeenda Lebanon bado ni mimi nimeenda nikawasimamia, na niko na watoto wangu 2 na wasistangu 3. Ni mimi, wazazi wangu pia wanakuanga wagonjwa, wako na high blood pressure na arthritis. Nyanyangu alikuanga na cancer, na ni mimi nimeishi kumsimamia mpaka time yake ya kuaga.
But also one of the interesting things I've observed, Brenda, is it seems also some governments in this part of the world are seeing labor migration as a way of addressing this unemployment. So there's an element of sort of, what should I use? Encouragement.
Yeah.
Young people are being encouraged to go to the Middle East and, find work there and
Yeah. In fact,
pay back,
yeah,
take back money, remittances.
Yeah. So in fact, that was going to be my next question. We know that it's quite difficult as an African to move, and not only within the African continent, but also to move outside of the African continent. But now that we're seeing more and more Africans, and specifically Kenyans, migrating to these countries, why do you think it's much easier to go to Lebanon, for instance, or Qatar compared to going to the UK? Does that mean that the government makes it easier, facilitates it for Kenyans who wish to to migrate for work?
Well, okay, if you look at Europe, of course, European countries have become very nationalistic since the so-called migration crisis of, I think it was 2015, yes, of 2015. Movements from Africa, migration from Africa to Europe, also migration from Syria and other parts of the Middle East to Europe has also become quite restricted. And countries have become, at EU level, within the UK as well, lots of restrictions. So it's becoming harder for any African who has aspirations to move to Europe to go there. And then you see on the flip side that, countries in Eastern Africa are now, negotiating or even signing bilateral labor agreements with countries in the Middle East. And these agreements actually allow, or rather it's a process of just facilitating that movement of laborers from Kenya or from Uganda or from Ethiopia or Rwanda or elsewhere in the region to the Middle East and to go and work in specific sectors. Because there's a high demand for domestic workers in this region, in the Gulf and the Middle East, then of course some of these bilateral labor agreements are very specific to domestic workers. So for instance, the labor agreement that Kenya has signed with Saudi Arabia is specific to domestic workers. And it talks about like the minimum wage, for instance, for domestic workers, which is about like $375 per month as minimum wage. So it's very specific to domestic workers. Of course, Saudi Arabia is attracting workers in other sectors from Kenya, but this particular bilateral labor agreement is specific to domestic workers. Yeah. And so, when you see such agreements and it specifies what process a migrant should follow, a prospective migrant should follow in order to go to the Middle East, including receiving, pre-departure training with training agencies that are accredited with the national NITA, the national agency that, for training that falls. This agency falls under the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. Going through this pre-departure training, ensuring that you have a contract as a migrant domestic worker, having that contract attested by a labor officer, which also sits under the Ministry of Labor. Of course, ensuring that you've gone through this whole process is managed by a private employment agency that is, again, accredited, registered, and accredited by the Ministry of Labor. So they're actually like administrative processes, official processes that are recognized and that are overseen by the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. So with such processes in place, then it becomes much easier for agencies, because of course in Kenya, in the countries of destination like Kenya, the private agencies will work closely with the private agencies, in Kenya, will work closely with the private agencies in the countries of destination such as Lebanon, so that they're able to facilitate this employment process, because the prospective employers in the countries of origin will then go to an agent there and say, I'm looking to hire a migrant worker from, do you have any? I'm looking to hire a domestic worker, do you have any? And this is what I'm willing to pay. And then this agent will then work with a partner agent in Kenya to facilitate that process. And of course, throughout this whole process, the migrant domestic worker, if you're talking specifically to do in relation to the migrant domestic worker, the contractual process or the employment process is managed by the two agents in the two countries. But ultimately, the person sponsoring this whole process is the employer. And of course, in these countries in the Middle East, the employment system is guided by, or the migrant employment system is guided by what is called the kafala system. And so in that system, it's people refer to it as a sponsorship system, because under that kafala system, it's the employer who covers the cost of all this. Basically, the migrant domestic worker is not supposed to cover any costs. So the employer in Lebanon, for instance, or Saudi Arabia, or Qatar, Kuwait, will cover the costs for the visa, for ideally even for the medical tests that the worker should undertake before they even sign that contract. For the passport, if they don't have access to a passport, because if they don't have a passport, then the agent in Kenya will have to process one. For any other costs of travel, including the flight ticket. And so, because it's called it's referred to as a sponsorship system, it means that the employer then ends up actually, the immigration process and related rights and responsibilities end up being held by the employer and not by the state.